Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Bryan Howard on the line. Bryan, how are you today?
Oh, thank you.
Really good to have you. Been looking forward to this chat for a while. So why don't you share a little bit about you and the work you do, and then we'll jump into this conversation.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm Bryan Howard. I'm the owner and CEO of Peoplyst, which is a workforce consultancy that solves people problems for businesses. I've been in the people space. Some people call it HR. I just like to think about it as people. And I've been in the people space for almost 3 decades and enjoy solving problems. And so I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of those things.
Yeah, I'm with you. The human resources name has been around a long time, and I think people know what it is, but it's people, and it's connecting people, whether they're the employee or the employer or a mix thereof, and collectively getting together to, create something that is beneficial to society, whether it's a product or a service. And when everyone is operating in their sweet spot, it makes such a big difference. And that's when you start seeing great companies really thrive. So one of the things, I definitely wanted to talk to you today about is your book, because you dive into this a lot. So why don't you share a bit about your book?
Sure. So I have a copy of it here so everybody can see it. It's the Vanguard Edge, your 6-step method to unparalleled team success. And the book is, as it says, a 6-step methodology for building what I call a Vanguard team, or a super team, if you want to look at it that way. And the Vanguard team itself, the name comes from the term Vanguard, which a Vanguard is someone who is at the forefront of society. So there are people who are movers and shakers who are pulling society forward. Those are Vanguards. Not necessarily geniuses, just people who are on the cutting edge of trying new things and exploring new territories. So the idea of being a Vanguard team is that, and you can read in the book where we talk about the 2 pieces of a Vanguard team are a growth mindset and a strong team culture. And so there's an assessment in the book, which is free, and anybody can take it. And you take the assessment, it gives you a score on 2 axes. The first one being growth mindset, and the second one, like I mentioned, team strength. And the highest score you can get is a 75-75. So plotted on there, that would put you in the very far right-hand corner of the Vanguard quadrant. And that's how you would become a Vanguard team. And of course, it's a 4-quadrant matrix. So the other 4 quadrants also have their own characteristics as well. For example, the bottom right-hand corner is someone who has a fixed growth mindset, but has a strong team. So those are the people who you hear say things often like, well, it's because we've always done it that way. Or I don't like to change for change's sake. Those are the kinds of things you hear from those people. So that quadrant is called the monolith. And those teams are often very successful. They just don't innovate. So they tend to die. And if you want a great example of what that looks like, look at newspapers who avoided going online digitally and continue to print paper newspapers until they just went out of business. So without a growth mindset and the ability to move into the digital space, a lot of newspapers died. And then companies that didn't print anything, like the Huffington Post, they did exceptionally well because they were able to grow and succeed, take a strong team and add that growth mindset to it. And then they were very successful. So that's a good dichotomy between 2 industries that did that. So the book is all about building a Vanguard team, and there's 6 M's in the book. And if you follow the 6 M's in order, starting with mindset, of course, then you can build the best team possible for your company.
Yeah, mindset is huge. And I do a lot of work with people. I know your team does a ton of work on this as well. And, dealing with individuals or even teams that are struggling with burnout. And a lot of it, quite frankly, and I had my own personal journey with burnout, almost 16 years ago now, which is alarming. But my first career was accounting, so I can sort of do math, and it's still kind of mind-boggling. It's been that long. But mindset is a big thing. And you hear about the Monday blues where people are like, "Ugh, I don't want to go to work tomorrow," and it's a mindset thing where if you shift that, you say, I get to go to work tomorrow. Now, for some people, that may sound silly at first, but I get to, because there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you're aware of it. We see the studies, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal last week about it, where it's taking longer for people to find work, which is kind of a quick, shift from just a short time ago when organizations were having difficulty finding people at all because of the pandemic and all the nuances from that. And the pendulum has swung the other way where it's like, no, it's, maybe not as easy to find work. So, and I've seen that throughout my life. And obviously in your career, you've seen that pendulum swing every which way but loose. So love to hear your thoughts on that, because the mindset thing, I think if you can get that right, that I don't want to say it's going to make the other 5 Vanguard steps easier, but if you don't get mindset right, my hunch is the other steps aren't going to come as easy as they should.
Absolutely. And the second step, the second M is mission. And people say all the time, well, wouldn't you want to put mission before mindset? And I say, no way, because if you're not ready mentally to go on the journey, then the mission doesn't really matter. So mindset is very important. It's funny, I listened to people, I had a lot of conversations prior to the holidays with people and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, so there's always these conversations about what are you doing for the holidays? And I heard a lot of people say, I have to go to X's house, like I have to go to my parents' house, or I have to go to my brother's house, or I have to go to the in-laws' house. And there was a lot of have to and very few get to. And so I made some jokes about that along the way over the holidays. And I say, you have to go or you get to go. And a lot of them, laughed and chuckled at the idea of it, and then would correct themselves and say, no, I get to go visit my parents. And it's a good thing. With this mindset is takes it a step further, and you think about, okay, at one point in my life, I was very much a writer and enjoyed English, but I did not enjoy math. And so you talked about being an accountant and can do math. So I decided at some point in my life that I needed to be able to do math because I wanted to be in business. And so I started focusing on it. And then funny enough, many years later, I met my wife by tutoring her and another group of students in one of my classes in calculus. So I went from saying I'm terrible at math to saying I can be better at math and I'm going to work at it, and then met my wife by tutoring someone in calculus. So that's what I mean by a shift in mindset. Now, if I wouldn't have made the shift in mindset, I would have never met my wife that I have today, because I certainly wouldn't have been tutoring anyone in calculus. But it just gives you an idea of how mindset can really open up opportunities for you that you wouldn't otherwise have. Because if you continually say you're bad at math, that you can't get better, then you will continually be bad at math. And that is limiting in many ways.
Well, definitely, even, during, or actually just prior to the pandemic, I was never one that had a whole lot of interest in cooking. I could cook, but I just didn't have any desire to learn about combinations of dishes, spices and how they did all of that. And then finally, it was enough is enough. I had my calculus moment like you did. I'm going to learn how to do this. And now, I'll look at a recipe for something and go, you know what? I think this would pair better with this, or I'm going to use this particular spice instead of that one because I think it'll pair better with that, or I like that because I've played around with it. Now, of course, thankfully, if it completely bombs, there's food choices within walking distance to where I live. So if it bombs, I'm not waiting 2 hours to eat. I can go do something and like, all right, yeah, I'm here. I'm buying them, the restaurant food because, well, that didn't work out, but that's rare. It wasn't rare in the early days. The early days was, kind of like your 4-year-old with an easy bake oven. It was like, yeah, it's a little dry, but it works. But again, it's a mindset thing, and I love how you said this a moment ago, where if you get the mindset right, then as I had mentioned, I think the other steps are easier. And you'd mentioned mission, being the next step. Yeah, getting the mission right and having it clearly articulated and understood by your team is important because people interpret things differently. So that's why when you have, especially if you're doing a rebranding in an organization or you're doing a strategic session and you're kind of revisiting who you are as an organization, when you look at the mission, you have to ask yourself, okay, does this still resonate with us? Does this resonate with us as an individual? Do you think this resonates with our client base? Or should we look at this again? And we've seen many successful organizations, change their mission a bit, and because they recognize that the one that they had wasn't working as well as they thought it would, and now it's, let's try something else. And I love organizations that'll be bold and take those risks because again they're looking at it in a way of, how can we be better? And again, that's a mindset thing. It's like, how can we be better at what we do? And I think organizations that have that as kind of a foundation, I think helps them navigate these ever-changing times. And every year there's always something new thrown at us, and we'll see what 2025 brings. But we're battle tested. I must say that over the last 5 years, I'm pretty sure we're all battle tested for sure. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I talk about in the book. I talk about Microsoft, and I tell several stories in the book. I talk about BlackBerry in the book and how they changed over time based on mindset and mission. But the big story for me is the Microsoft story that's in the book. And if you know anything about Microsoft, when they first started, the idea behind Microsoft was to create basically software that could run computers in a way that would put a computer on every desk in the world. So that's basically their mission statement was a computer on every desk. And I'm paraphrasing, but that was the extent of it. And that served them very well. And Bill Gates was there, and they built software, and they built Microsoft Office. And of course, all of that is history at this point. So they built an operating system and a productivity suite that is ubiquitous. It's like almost every, and Google and some of the other companies have made some inroads, but Microsoft is really the one. Well, that didn't serve them. And so they basically got there. So what do you do now? You met your mission, which was a computer on every desk, and now there basically is one, a computer on every desk. So now what? And they hired a visionary named Satya Nadella and made him the CEO of Microsoft. And he said, that was a great mission to start with, but now we're going to lean into artificial intelligence and process automation and those types of things. And so Microsoft completely changed who they were. And so we go back to mindset is Microsoft said, we've been a software company all this time, but now we want to shift gears and essentially become a company that is focused on AI and automation and building the workforce and work ways of the future. And so they made that shift. And as wildly successful as Microsoft was during the computer on every desk days with Bill Gates, where Microsoft's market cap really exploded was after Satya Nadella. Excuse me, I had a little bit of a cold. So after Satya Nadella took over and changed the mission of the company and changed the mindset of the company, Microsoft really blossomed into one of the largest organizations on the planet. And that story just tells you that it can be done. They really shifted gears. BlackBerry went from a company that got outperformed by Nokia and Apple and then eventually Samsung to the point that BlackBerry quit making phones. And now you can find BlackBerry security software in refrigerators in your kitchen if they're connected to Wi-Fi. The BlackBerry's in your car. So BlackBerry didn't cease to exist. They just changed their mission. And the way they were able to do that was to say, we don't have to be a phone company. We can be a security software company. And so they had a growth mindset and a strong team, and they were able to pivot and now become incredibly successful as a completely different, reimagined brand. So that's book talks about some of those stories, but those things are super important. And of course, mission is there. The next M is model. And in order to achieve the mission, you have to have a good working model, which is something that Satya Nadella also changed to make it a better to make it a better company overall.
Yeah, and I love those stories, and well aware of them. And you think about a company like Microsoft, where they were gigantic, and then they completely shifted gears, and they're bigger than they ever were. And those are the opportunities if you have that mindset of, okay, what are we going to do next? Okay, we've done that. Okay, that's been done. Now what? And so many organizations, they don't have that now what model in their thought process. They just don't think about that. They're like, this is our goal. We get there. Okay, now that we got here, now what? And a lot of them don't. And that's why you see so many huge successful companies disappear. The one of the stats I love sharing, I shouldn't say love sharing. It's sad in a way, but I understand it that, since the year 2000, over 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 are gone or were acquired. These are the top 500 companies on the planet. Gone. Half of them. So you're a small, mid-sized business. You think you're going to be thinking, okay, we're going to be around forever. Eh, the odds are no, unless you follow something like your system, because if it's a roadmap, it's a game plan. It has all kinds of different annotations, but you get those M's right, and those six steps. You're going to be you're going to be well prepared to navigate through whatever we face.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I was I was interviewing. I have another book coming out later this year called People Problem Solved, and it's a handbook for managers and leaders to help them solve their own people problems. And as part of that, I'm doing 300 interviews with all people from all walks of life in the business world, business owners, HR, large business, small business. And I just interviewed someone today who spent 10 years at Circuit City in the IT department, was a leader in the IT department. And Circuit City was featured in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, as one of the companies that went from good to great. And then they were also featured in the next book, which was How the Mighty Fall. And Circuit City was crushing Best Buy in every possible way, and now Best Buy is still here, and Circuit City's been gone for years. And it's just a good example of if you don't have the right model, you can go away, as you mentioned. And so it was something else, and it was a little bit painful to hear him talk about the demise of Circuit City and how all the employees could see it happening, but that they really couldn't do anything about it. All they could do was come to work every day, try to influence as much as they could, but that the leadership was steadfast in their desire to go in the direction they were going, and that direction ended up being down the drain, sadly.
I remember Circuit City got a ton of my money when I was younger,
Me too.
and was in there all the time. Every weekend would look at the circular and go, okay, what's for sale? What's going on? Oh, I need that. I need that. And it's just one of those things where you look at it and go, well, what happened? And it's well documented what happened, and so many organizations get married to this is what it is, and they put the blinders on, and they don't look around, and they don't listen to their people, the front lines. They see things that the C-suite doesn't, and vice versa. So that's why communication is such a critical thing. When you see something on the horizon that could be a problem, you want to have an environment where people can share that, so you can navigate around it or through it depending on what it is. And if you say, no, this is how it is, heels in the ground, I'm not budging, well, you know what? And then I don't want to call Best Buy an inferior product. That's not the phrase I want to use, but someone that is not as good as you as far as the marketplace can come and take your lunch and your dinner and all your future meals if you don't continue to innovate and listen to your customer base and your internal and external customers. Because if you say this is how we've done it, paraphrasing what you mentioned earlier, you're going to be stuck, and eventually it's going to catch up to you. Maybe not in the short term, but if Microsoft would have said, you know what, our bread and butter is Microsoft Office, and this is what we're going to do, and we're just going to stick to it, and it's like, Yeah, they've innovated it. There's some new things, and of course, AI is making it easier with spreadsheet formulas and all that kind of stuff. And I know that they're doing a ton of stuff in that arena as well that can, automate a whole lot of work that has eaten up way too many nights and weekends for consultants and creators and whatnot. But if they decided, no, we're just continue to crank it out, $600 a year for the renewal. Here's some new updates. We changed the color, we changed the fonts. We got rid of that ribbon bar that everybody hated, or no, it's still here, but you can find the old menu. If they would have stuck down that path, well, we might be talking about Microsoft in a different light. And so it's important for every organization, no matter what size you are, continue to look forward, and talk with people, listen to, people like Bryan that is hearing things and seeing things, and you'll do yourself well by, I don't want to say not resting, because that would be kind of funny for somebody who talks about burnout to not rest, but do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. But just keep your eyes and ears open, because there's opportunities out there, and look at them as opportunities. For going back to the mindset thing, it's like, don't look for danger. No, look for opportunities. Okay, what can we do with that? And organizations that do that, again, we see them. They're the strong ones. They're the ones that pivot and are agile and navigated the pandemic and continue to thrive no matter what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that. We started off about 3 years ago. The company, we started off as Mercury Performance Group, and we were doing pretty good with that, good branding, and had a lot of fun and a lot of good top of funnel brand recognition to get started. We worked really hard at it. We're really proud of the name, had a great origin story. And I decided that I wanted to trademark the name and the logo just to protect it. So, because we were starting to do a lot of work nationally and even internationally in some cases. So I filled out a trademark application, and 8 months later, expecting to get the trademark application back as, you're good to go, I got it back that said, yeah, it's good. We're going to advertise the mark now so that people can file an opposition if they so wish. And so the next thing I got after that was filed was a cease and desist letter from a company in Europe, basically, not to call them out, but a cease and desist letter telling me to stop using the mark immediately, that I was infringing on their trademark. And so then it became a long drawn out issue. And then I was faced with the decision, which, funny enough, will go back right to the have to, got to thing, or get to. I was faced with a decision: is, do I fight this? And is there an opportunity for me to win and continue to use Mercury, because I've got all this brand cachet that I've built over those couple of years? Or do I spend that money instead? Not that I don't like making lawyers rich, but could I spend that money instead on just rebranding and choosing a new name and going to market as a different entity? And of course, I'm still me, but it would just be a different logo on my shirt, So we decided to do that and talked to friends and family members, and basically had a little contest and came up with the name Peoplyst. My good friend April Curlew came up with it. She's terrific. And so we decided to go out under the new brand of Peoplyst. And our top of funnel and mid funnel marketing and advertising has already eclipsed that Mercury Performance Group after just a few months. So we went live with the name in October. So it's really just been a few months, and our website traffic and the amount of inquiries that we get, the sales piece of it has been remarkable, because it's so much better received than Mercury Performance Group. So here was and I won't kid you, I was very much upset and in the I have to change my name mindset, and it was bad for a little while. I was a little depressed about it, and it drew on for quite a while we worked through the lawsuit piece. And then now, of course, I finally just said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be resilient and change the name, and did. And it's worked out remarkably well for us. And we love the new name and brand far and away better than we did the Mercury brand as well. So it's just a good story about being resilient and having the right mindset, and practicing what we preach, right? Is building an adaptable and resilient company. And unfortunately, that was something that Circuit City didn't do. And, you talk about those kinds of things. Ask Blockbuster how they feel now.
Exactly. And it's, I'm not biased in any stretch, but I like Peoplyst. That is a really, really good name. And it passes the raise the eyebrow test. Like, okay. And you kind of get an idea. It's like, okay, I'm a Peoplyst, because it's a play on word of other, like therapist or, there's just so many different things that jump out at me when I saw the name, because obviously I was following Mercury before, and I saw, the name change, and I looked and, not knowing the backstory, and thank you for sharing that, because it's a good example. I think some people say, you know what, I want to do this. And I remember, and want to wrap this up and make sure people know where to find you, and definitely pick up the book so they can, get all the other tidbits in there, because it's packed full with it. But I worked for a nonprofit many years ago that was going through a rebrand, and it was one of the stories in history. I'm not going to mention their name, but they actually went with the longer name, which is like, are you kidding me? It's like, so they had to shorten the domain name. It's like, if we type that, it's like, we're going to have to borrow the other kid's alphabet kit because we're running out of letters here. It's just too long. But, the branding consultants, they came in, they said, okay, well, here's a name that we could use. Coach. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm like, and my boss, female, likes expensive stuff, knows who that is, and she looks, and her reaction boggled my mind at first, because originally I thought she was going to just fly across the table and choke the person. Not that she was a physical violent person, but that was kind of my expectation in that moment. But she did the infamous dog head tilt, like, and we said, I can go out on a limb here. I'm pretty sure that name's Coach, or that name's trademarked. We're not going to be able to use that. So, because there's designer bags, there's a bus line company. Those are two that came to mind. I'm sure there are others. Yes. Like, and we even said, it's okay. We're a community service agency. We got healthcare and mental health and financial aid, all kinds of different things. So we were a community hub, basically, in a underserviced area. You drop the name Coach, someone's going to look at that. And again, this is coming from a former accountant. They're going to go, well, what is it? What do they do? I don't know. So Peoplyst, I look at that, it's like, okay, they're in the people business. I without knowing anything else about the organization, that's my first assumption. And obviously that's the assumption that people are making, because you're getting the website hits and everything else. So Bryan, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
So they can find us at peoplyst.com, which is PEOPLYST.com. And I'll make an offer to your listeners, which is always good for a freebie. So here's the book, The Vanguard Edge. You can pick it up on Amazon, but you don't have to. If you will send me an email to Bryan, BRYAN, Howard, HOWARD, at peoplyst.com. Just put the subject line breakfast and give me your mailing address, and I'll send you a copy of the book for free.
That is very generous. Thank you, Bryan, for that. And we'll definitely have that information in the show notes. So, Bryan, continue being awesome. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.